Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at Morphy's taking a look at an adorable little 70mm St Chamond mountain gun. Now, if you watched the video just a couple weeks ago about the 75mm St Chamond field gun, well, this is a cousin to it. This is another gun that uses the same basic breech mechanism that was set up, described, requested by Manuel Mondragon of Mexico. Mexico didn't have any artillery manufacturing capabilities before World War I, and so the Mexicans worked with foreign suppliers to get their artillery, and in particular, they liked working with St Chamond, and they bought a bunch of these mountain guns from the French just prior to World War I. So the French actually adopted a gun like this in 1906. It was actually a 65mm gun, but it was also a mountain gun. And the concept of a mountain gun is basically the gun needs to be light and simple so that it can be packed through difficult terrain. And this, for example, can be disassembled into 4 separate loads for pack horses or mules. And that's how you would maneuver it around really rough country. So these are guns that were pretty popular and pretty useful in remote, rural, sort of counterinsurgency type fights that one would have outside of, say, the plains of Central Europe, where we see things like World War I. If you're going to be fighting in mountains, in jungles, in places where you don't have a lot of troops, you don't have a lot of infrastructure, a light, handy gun like this can be extremely useful. So even though the French adopted, well, they adopted not this, they adopted a different one in 1906, but several French companies, including St Chamond here, as well as the Schneider company, both manufactured their own designs of these sorts of guns to sell on the commercial export market. For example, these being developed at the request of Mexico, and then they were sold to both Mexico and Guatemala. And this particular one is a Guatemalan contract gun. We'll see that on the breech block in a moment. They were also sold to Belgium for use in the Belgian Congo. Again, low infrastructure sort of place. There's some interesting stuff going on there. We'll talk about those in a few minutes. But first, let's take a closer look at exactly how this works. Let's start with a look at the breech block markings here. Of course, República de Guatemala. It's a Guatemalan contract gun. This is a Canon 70mm de montaña, so it's a mountain gun. TR is tir rapide, or rapid fire, made by St Chamond. This is serial number 3, made in the year 1913, and 98 kilos, weight 98 kilos. That, I believe, is just for the breech assembly, because again, this thing breaks down into 4 pieces. The breech mechanism here is essentially the same as on the big 75mm St Chamond. It is an interrupted thread, so to open it, depress the safety lever, crank this through there. It will then open up like so. There's a little manual extractor that will kick the empty case out right there. You can see the interrupted threads. There's 3 sections of them that lock into interrupted threads in the breech block. And of course, to reload, you stuff a shell in there, close the breech block, lock the handle around, and then pull on the firing lever, which is not currently there. In order to control recoil, there is a recoil absorber here on the bottom. That's that big cylinder. So this entire upper assembly is going to recoil backwards when firing and then recuperate forward. That helps keep this thing in position when you shoot. A mountain gun like this has a number of characteristics it's going to need. It needs to be light and simple because it has to be disassembled and portable by pack animals. It has to be used in rough terrain in areas without a lot of support. So you don't want fragile, complicated mechanisms that are prone to breakage. You don't want guns that require a lot of maintenance because these things are going to be sent out into some pretty Spartan areas for use. So, for example, on this guy, there is no windage adjustment. If you want to adjust the aim of the gun left to right, you move the trail at the back end. You can adjust the elevation using this crank handle, and this actually has quite a lot of elevation capacity so that you can fire over hills or up steep slopes. Still going. This is much greater elevation than you would get from most general field guns. There we go, that's about maxed out, about 45 degrees there. There is a mounting point here for a set of sights or probably an optic. Unfortunately, I don't have that to show you. The gun was also designed for use with a protective armored splinter shield And you can see the mounting points for that shield here. There's one on each side of each wheel. Again, I don't have the shield, and frankly, the shield for a gun like this is the sort of thing that often gets left off when the gun's out in the field, because it's heavy and it's a pain to move around, and it's usually considered kind of unnecessary. If I did have that optic, it would live here in this compartment in the trail. So that's clearly set up for the spindle and the optic itself in there. Unfortunately, like I said, we don't have that to show you. There are a whole lot of sort of fold-up elements to a gun like this. So you can see the hinges here. Once you unlock it for packing, the back half of the trail folds up and over the top half. We have the seats here for the gunner and the loader, and those are going to fold out like so. So fold in for storage. If you take a look at the trunnions here, where the barrel assembly mounts into its carriage, you can see that if you disassemble the elevation gear, you can, once you rotate the barrel all the way up, it actually lifts out of the trunnion with this flat section. So part of the disassembly. Well, there you go. I don't think there's a whole lot else to show you on this. Not a lot of extraneous fancy features, because, well, you don't really want a whole lot of extraneous, complicated, fancy features when you're planning to take something like this on some donkeys into the jungle. So the two things that distinguish the Belgian Congo versions of this gun from, well, this version of this gun are, first off, the Belgian Congo guns apparently actually had a semi-automatic breech mechanism. Manuel Mondragon developed a system by which, when the whole action recoiled, it would actually automatically unlock and open the breech block, which is, in a way, kind of like what we see on the PTR-D, Russian anti-tank rifle from World War II. It had a similar sort of system, and frankly, semi-automatic artillery pieces are not that uncommon. And in artillery context, semi-automatic means it automatically ejects the empty casing. Doesn't mean that it reloads. You have to reload this thing manually no matter what. The other thing about the Belgian Congo guns is that there was a small batch of them in production when World War I began. And so those guns did not get sent to Africa, even though they weren't, standard current use things. They were kept in Europe and used in the fighting in World War I. So I think this is a pretty cool, cute little gun. Apparently, like the brass for this is not readily available today, but it can be actually converted from, I guess, Japanese 70mm mountain gun brass, which is more readily available to the extent that these sorts of things are available to anyone. There is a whole community of guys who collect and shoot artillery. It's a tight, close-knit community, and those guys have connections for this sort of supply. So this actually can be fired if that's something that someone is interested in doing. And the gun itself is in pretty darn nice condition. So big thanks to Morpheus for giving me access to this to film for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.